Good night, each and every one of you. We are happy to have you here. We had a little pause last week, but we're back and we hope to finish off all these modules as scheduled. So tonight we have module 4 and it is being facilitated by Miss Sue. Miss Sue, can you please introduce yourself and then you can start. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sunsan Hodge. I am a member of the Anguilla Fisherfolk Association. I am a disaster manager by profession, and in my spare time, I am also a Toastmaster. So I am used to giving presentations, and it's my pleasure. I am a graduate also of the CNFO Leadership Institute, so I'm happy to give back. Can you all hear me? Because I can't see a thing once I'm sharing. Nadine, you can hear me?
We can hear you well, Sue.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And we can see the presentation as well.
Ah, awesome. Thank you. Today, we'll be exploring the key skills that every fisherfolk community needs to thrive: advocacy, representation, negotiation, and conflict resolution. These are the tools that will empower us to protect our livelihoods, voice your concerns, and shape the better future for yourselves and future generations. Why does advocacy matter to fisherfolk? Advocacy gives you a voice. It ensures policies that reflect the needs of the fishing community, and it protects your rights and resources. Advocacy from a fisherfolk organization is about ensuring that your concerns are heard by the decision makers. Without advocacy, your issues could be overlooked when policies are made, and it also allows you to influence laws, regulations, and policies that affect your livelihood, from fishing rights to environmental regulations. A strong advocacy strategy can help prevent harmful practices that threaten fish stocks, ocean health, and community welfare, as well as your livelihoods. So advocacy is the activity carried out by an individual or group with the aim to influence and change the decisions made by political, economic, and social institutions. I'm going to give my presentation. And if you want to ask a question, Nadine, will you be able to say, because I can't see once I'm sharing, if anybody has their hand up or anything like that. Yes, but feel free to ask. Okay, but feel free to ask questions as we go through. An advocacy plan is part of the strategy that needs to cover the elements of goals and objectives for the target groups, and most importantly, the specific actions that must be carried out. So for the key areas that I think for fisherfolk advocacy are sustainable fishing practices, fair trade and market access, environmental protection, safety and working conditions, and government support for small-scale fishers. I think those are all important things that we should be advocating for. Just a second. Yeah, the principles of advocacy, attitude and emotions. Sorry, don't yell. Sorry, drop your voice when you feel anger. If the other party seems to be acting in good faith, respond in kind. Because when you go into meetings, you don't want to be confrontational. You want to reach a solution that is going to be beneficial to the fisherfolk. Focus on how you can get your partners to do what you think they need to do. And never threaten anything that you're not fully prepared to carry out successfully. You need to be flexible. You can't go into any kind of meeting and think that, oh, it's my way or no way. We have to be flexible because other people have things that they need to take into consideration as well that we may not know about. So keep an open mind and make sure that the dialogue invites creativity. Don't think that this is the only way. Sometimes when we're having a discussion, you may think, oh, but if we do it this way, it might change. And so you have an opportunity. You can set a time limit on trying new ideas, because if you do, it doesn't mean that it has to stay. If you advocate for something and you want it done and it's agreed upon, it doesn't have to stay that way all the time. You can agree to try it for a 3-month, a 6-month, or even a year period, and then review it and see if it makes sense at the end of that and see if it's successful or not. Determination. Flexibility is how a problem gets solved. And it's not the same as whether it gets solved. Not everything is worth going to war on. Always ask, is this my issue? Because sometimes people want to come into meetings and bring their own issues, not your issues. So you want to focus on what you want done for yourself as a fisher folk or as a fisher folk organization. That's what you need to focus on. Create a paper trail. Make sure that when you go into any meetings, whether you're advocating or representing, that you have a paper trail. Send an email. Say that what you want. Put an agenda together. It doesn't have to be anything detailed. It just says, you know, the welcome, what we're going to discuss, and then you can put minutes or notes together to say that this is what we discussed and this is a decision that we came up with. Because people have a way of forgetting what they said when somebody asks them a question. And we have to remember, you may never need to have the paper trail, but it's always good to have it because it provides evidence. If somebody comes back a year, 2 or 3 years later and say, well, we only gave it to you for this time because we wanted it for then, but you realize that there was a decision made that it will be for the next 5 to 10 years. So you want to make sure that you have that evidence. Knowledge. You need to help educate your group to understand their abilities. Keep it short and keep it simple, but create an outline that includes the symptoms and strategies that work. You've been in this for a long time. You know what works, what doesn't, and you're open to new ideas. So let's, collectively you can come up with creative ideas, but you have to have that knowledge in the background. Learn about your rights and the responsibilities in the law. As they change the law, I can remember, I'll use an example in Anguilla, when during COVID, they stopped the fishers from going out. And then they relented and said, only if you were registered with fisheries, could you go out to fish. But that wasn't a stipulation before. So not everybody had been registered. So those who weren't registered were unable to fish, and the window for registering had already closed. So they basically cut off a large section of fishers from being able to go out and fish. We were able to advocate and that was changed, but you have to keep abreast of responsibilities in the law. And study and attend workshops, which is exactly what we're doing right now. The workshops that CNFO is putting on, the Leadership Institute, is always going to help you, so you never have to worry about that. What are the most common causes of dissension in advocacy groups? When they don't communicate. You have an organization, you as the executive, you're going ahead and doing what you want to do, but you're not telling the rest of the people in the organization. They need to know, because if they don't know, then they're going to keep asking questions and it's going to cause dissension. Loss of interest, or when it's slow to show the results of your advocacy. Advocacy is not something that is going to happen immediately. It might take some time, but you need to go for the small wins so that you can at least show that you're making progress. And the group having a narrow focus and having no injection of ideas, that's what happens when we don't have, that can cause dissension. You just think, okay, we want to get cheaper gas for fishers, but you're not taking into consideration that the equipment, the other equipment that is needed is not there. So you need to broaden your focus and represent on a larger scale. And the DNM method, discover, continuously identify what you need to advocate on, because it's not always going to be the same. Nurture, you build deeper personal relationships that exceed your advocacy expectations. The more you get together as an organization, the more you'll get to know persons, and the easier it will be for persons to suggest ideas. Mobilize, deploy your advocates on missions to drive specific business outcomes. If you know that you have somebody who can negotiate for the cheaper gas, then you do that. If you have somebody who can negotiate for a rescue boat, then you do that. But you utilize, mobilize what you can. Any questions so far? No? Okay. What is representation? This is a very wordy slide, but basically, representation is the action of speaking or acting on behalf of someone or the state of being represented. The fact that most of the people in this workshop are either in a fisherfolk organization or want to be part of one means that we're already looking at representation. Having someone who understands your interests speak on your behalf. The fact that you're here means that you know that when you go to speak to your ministers, to your fisheries departments, to the government, that you need to know exactly what it is that these people are saying and that they're representing you. It allows you to be involved in the decision-making process, and it gives you representation at the local, national, and global levels. Representation is often interpreted as advocacy, as people don't always differentiate between the two, because people tend to see and associate representation with media campaigning, the high-profile legal challenges, or petitions, posters, etc. These are the visible actions of the actors, but it does, and how they're going to try and force policy change. However, this is only one piece of the puzzle. And representation is considered the whisper or the cooperative approach, while advocacy is, I don't like to say it, but the shouting or the confrontational approach. You're going up in their face and you're telling them what you'd like to have done. Both processes in meeting the object have to meet both of the processes meet the objective of the organization. So here we have a diagram where advocacy is evidence-based and representation is about the persons who represent you. So you have the executive, you have the organization, and you have your members. So the representatives focus on specific action, and the advocates think beyond the specific campaign. So representatives might decide we want to talk about the boats and the licensing of the boats, whereas advocates want to look at the entire fisherfolk organization, how it factors into CNFO and to the wider populations. So negotiation. Negotiation is a strategic discussion that's intended to resolve an issue in a way that both parties find acceptable. It's about reach an agreement that benefits you. It's a balance between compromise and protecting your core interests, and it's critical in ensuring fair deals in trade, regulations, and resource access. So what are some of the negotiation skills and tips? Listening skills. You have to listen carefully and observe the other side's behavior. Poor listeners miss opportunities. Listen to the words that they are using. Sometimes people tell you things in the way that they use words that if you're not listening, you're going to miss. Trying to think of an example now. What could be a way? Oh, well, if the person said what they said in the way in which you said they said it, then it must be true. That's very confusing. But if you pick the sense out of the nonsense, it means that they're saying that I think you're lying. If you really think about what was just said. So you have to listen to what people are saying, because they like to tie you up with words, but listen to the core of what they're saying. Having analytical skills. Analytical skills are basic for problem-solving situations. Think outside the box. Be professional and control your emotions. We know that when we're passionate about something and we go into a meeting and people are being deliberately forgetful or misunderstanding what you're saying, you can get passionate. But a loss of control could cause you to think irrationally and to lose the negotiations, or they can even lead to an unfavorable result. Communication skills. To succeed in business negotiations, you have to communicate clearly and effectively. Be patient and respect the other side. Now, this can be difficult, as I said, if they are being deliberately misunderstanding or they are being aggressive, it can be hard. But always be respectful to your opponent. Be patient, even if the other side is not. Your behavior during business negotiations can make impressions. You need to keep calm, use tact and diplomacy. One of the aims of negotiations is to continue and have good business relationships. Problem-solving skills. It's very important to have the ability to identify the problem and find the way to solve it. Sometimes it's not always obvious, but if you think about it, you can come up with another solution that ends up in a better situation by going a different route. And sometimes it's always not a straight line. Sometimes you have to go up a mountain and round the corner to get to the solution. Persuasive skills. Use both verbal and non-verbal persuasion and influencing skills as you negotiate. So you need negotiation skills for fisherfolk. You need to be clear about what you want. So when you go into the negotiations, what is it that I want to come out with? How can I get to what I want? Understand the other party's needs. As I said earlier, sometimes you could go into a negotiation and they have been given a ceiling of $10,000, say, and you are asking for 12. Maybe you can meet the compromise and get 11. They will have to ask permission, but you need to understand their needs as well. Know what your alternatives are. If you can't get it with this business or with this organization, maybe you have another opportunity to get it with somebody else. And be willing to compromise, but protect your core interests. Never lose sight of your core interests. Don't give up your rights just to get something on one end. So here's a scenario. A seller has a kettle of fish for sale. The buyer asks, how many fish are in the kettle? As the seller still fixed on the price. The seller will not say how many fish are in the kettle. So the buyer makes the seller an offer. What would you do in this scenario? What would you do differently? Because the person's going to make you an offer based on what they think is in the kettle, not on what may be in the kettle. Does anybody want to answer that? I'm not going to answer it. So can somebody suggest what they would do? You are still here, right? Hello?
Maybe we should just, maybe.
We can hear you.
Can
We can hear you.
somebody
Susan.
Could
We
you
can hear
just
you.
read the scenario again, please?
Good night. I will try. Good night. When's Sport Harry?
Hi.
You hear me?
Yes, I
Hello?
can hear you.
It's the same problem we have when a fisherman come in with his fish in this scenario, and then say like the price. The vendor is asking the fisherman, and the fisherman ain't want the price. Then we leave, and then we accept the price, and we tell somebody else, oh, this person here robbed me. When the person did not rob you, they offer you a price, and you accept the price. So what I think I will do in this situation here is stay to myself and stay to what I want for my goods in this scenario here, because if I do accept their price, that means I'm giving up my rights and in what you mentioned before, just to please that person that I could continue to do business with them. That is how I see that scenario there. It's about giving up your rights, as we mentioned before, just to please the buyer. Back to you, Trey.
Okay. Okay, thanks
So-
for that, Wins. But anybody else has an alternative?
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
While I think that's a strategic way to deal with it, remember what we're looking at is a situation where, or an outcome where both persons feel satisfied. So
Mhm.
I'm thinking about using another approach to the situation, because if that person is selling fish, then they must have a scale,
I
right?
wanted to make a contribution to this point.
So
I
I'm
thought
thinking,
I heard you a bit earlier. Adrian.
should I go ahead?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'll
I'm
wait until
thinking,
I'll wait until he's finished, Mitch. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry about that. Mitch is having internet problems, so he's delayed. Go ahead, and then I will facilitate the hands.
okay, no problem. I apologize. Thank you. What I would do in this regard is maybe use another approach towards getting the items. I would use a scale and weigh the kettle with the fish and propose a new price based on the current trend on the market. And hopefully the seller would be able to buy into, or we might be able to discuss amongst each other what would be the best price, whether it's his price or my price, or whether we could go in between his and my price. Because for me, that's what negotiation is about. Discussing the best options that would cause both parties to feel satisfied. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I think somebody else wanted to speak.
Yeah. Hello. Good night, everyone.
Good
Adrian
night.
here. Okay, on this question, this is a somewhat of a familiar scenario but particularly with fisher folk. While on the other, and as the question starts off, it's asking the buyer is asking how many fish is in the kettle, and the seller doesn't want to reveal that. That in itself is not a fair business, fair trade practice, right? Because you must try to be upfront and when you're trading with something. So the danger of doing this too is that in the instance where the buyer is not fully aware of what he's buying, they will tend to offer a very, very low price. The seller will most likely not want to accept that price. So how do you reach a negotiation? It's very difficult to reach a negotiation in those spaces because anything that happens after that point, the initial interaction is going to become somewhat of a confrontational battle, because the seller will think that the buyer is trying to take advantage of them, and the buyer is going to think that the seller is going to try and take advantage of them. So you really, it really requires that in the offer of anything for sale, because selling anything is offer and acceptance. So if the seller is offering something for sale and the buyer doesn't want to accept it, that should be the end of it. That should be the end of it. Because sometimes negotiations beyond that don't work out in anybody's favor, except the person who's desperate, basically, to either buy or sell the product. So it's kind of tricky, and I guess I'm not answering the question as to what is fair, because in this instance, nothing may be fair, and there may not be a solution to it. All right, so I'm just putting that out as another side of this coin. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that, Adrian. And you're right, because the seller has a kettle of fish. The buyer wants to know how many fish are in the kettle, because the seller isn't changing their price. So then and the seller doesn't want to tell the buyer how many fish are in there. So why would you not want to tell the person how many fish are in the kettle? Because if you tell them, if you tell them there's one fish in there and it's a 10-pound fish, is different to you telling them that not telling them anything, or you telling them that there are 10 half-pound fish in the kettle. And it would then determine what kind of price they're willing to pay, because I'm not going to buy something that I can't see. You need to give me some sort of information. Would everybody agree with that? And I can't see you, so that's a kind of rhetorical question, but if you can answer, somebody. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, I think, anyway.
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Conflict resolution. How many of you have ever been in a conflict? Oh gosh, I can't see your hands. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked that question. But I think that conflict is something that happens on a daily basis. Should I get up at 5 o'clock? Should I get up at 6 o'clock? Should I drive this car? Should I walk? Should I do, it's not conflict that is detrimental, but conflict is basically inevitable. Conflicts can arise within our community or with external parties, such as traders, government bodies, or even neighboring communities. I'll give you an example of Anguilla. Anguilla is located right next door to St. Martin, French and Dutch. So when Brexit happened and the UK pulled out of the European Union, that impacted our fishers, because for hundreds of years, Anguillians and St. Martiners have been exchanging their goods. The fishermen would fish whatever they They would take it to St. Martin, get it sold, and then what they couldn't get sold, they would sell in Anguilla. Now that means that all the fish that their customers selling, they can't take to St. Martin anymore because there are EU regulations in place that they're trying to change, but that was never considered when the UK decided to leave the European Union, how it would affect their overseas territories. Up to now, and this is what, 4 or 5 years later, and Anguillians still can't carry their fish to St. Martin to sell. St. Martiners can come over and buy the fish and take it back, but Anguillians can't go to St. Martin to sell their fish, which is something that's a conflict, definitely. And it's impacted the livelihoods of our fishermen. Conflict is often viewed as something that's negative, and it can disrupt the smooth operations of an organization. But all conflict doesn't have to be destructive. Conflict can make you see that there's another way of doing something. Because when that situation that I just gave you about the fishermen and St. Martin occurred, nobody ever thought that, oh, the St. Martiners can come to Anguilla and purchase the fish and take them back. It wouldn't have happened if we didn't have that conflict. It's not the best solution, but it is a solution until we can do better. So by embracing conflict, leaders can improve their communication and they can promote collaboration and foster a positive organizational culture. The importance of conflict resolution. Conflict is inevitable in any community. You have to resolve the disputes, and it's only by resolving the disputes that you're going to keep your community strong. You need to help, and it also helps maintain positive relationships within and outside the fishing community. Some causes of conflict: relationships, personality clashes, negative emotional interactions, and differences of opinions. Information, misinformation, and the lines of communication. Interests, personal gain versus your duties or multiple interests. And structures, resource allocation, management structure. How are you gonna resolve some of those things? And as with anything, what to do? Speak to those involved. When something occurs, don't go and speak to the person behind the other person and say, you know what this person did to me. Go to the person and speak to them directly, not in a confrontational manner, but just let them know that this has occurred. How can we resolve it? Identify the problem. List the possible solutions, because there's always multiple solutions. Evaluate the solutions. So you have 5 solutions there. Which is the best way to come to that? And then choose one of the solutions and you implement the solution. And if that solution doesn't work, then you can always come back and go to another one that you had and see if that one will work. Resolution techniques. You can look at active listening. Seek win-win solutions. Involve neutral mediators, because sometimes we're all both so passionate about one area. We need somebody who has no vested interest in the area, who needs to come in and mediate for us. You need to focus on the issue. Don't make personal attacks. I think this is something that some of our politicians need to understand, but focus on the issue. And there are 5 common styles of conflict resolution: competing, accommodating, avoiding, compromising, and collaborating. As we go into the next slide, you'll see where each of them are shown. When you accommodate, there's a lose-win. The person who is accommodating loses and the opposition wins. The avoider If you avoid the problem, if you don't seek the resolution, that means that both parties have lost. The controller, the person who wants to control it, if that means that the person who wants to control it, they win and the other party loses. If you collaborate, that means that both parties win. You may not win everything that you wanted, but you'll win something that will satisfy you. And right in the middle is compromise, where you have a mini win and a mini lose, so we can all get along. Anybody has any other ways of conflict resolution? Or did I cover them all?
For me, I think you did a great job.
Okay, great, thanks.
Can I just chime in for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Adrian here again. Yeah, this is a good point. The reason I say it's a good point, too, and I'm speaking basically to our sector, the fishery sector, where we need to or begin to grow into recognizing that our business is such that it requires a greater amount, a greater amount of skill than it did, say, 10 years ago. And it's often in relative to buyers and sellers. Most of us sell our products to a wholesaler or / buyer who is very well equipped in negotiating and business management. So what they do, so they tend to take advantage of our handicap of not being strong negotiators or even business people. And oftentimes they would already have their game plan in place when you come to buy their product, when you come to sell your product to them. They already have their game plan. They already know what they're going to do. So there's not a lot of room for negotiation. I think as fishers, we have to grow into the point of getting out of the take it or leave it position. I mean, that's going to take some growth. It's going to take, maybe some generational changes. But we have to bear that in mind when we go to a wholesaler, because a wholesaler, they think that they will never lose, and sometimes the practices are unfair. But we need to, again, grow into being better negotiators for ourselves and determining in advance what we expect to achieve. Sometimes it's best to have no fish than to have a lot of fish that you can't sell. If you get my drift. I'm going to be quick. I'll just give you one example here. We are having here in the Bahamas, we're having a bumper season in our crawfish harvest. I mean, there's a lot of product. And our guys have been complaining about the low prices that we're getting when we sell it. So my position to them has been, this is a classic example of supply and demand. We are supplying so much product that there's not a great demand for it. So we really should cut back on our harvest numbers. Of course, that hasn't gone down too well with fishermen because, they're saying they want to take advantage of it. I say, but what's the point? If you have 1,000 pounds of crawfish and you're only getting $500 for it versus having 500 pounds of crawfish that you're going to get $1,000 for. I mean, what do you prefer? You will always get that 500 pounds of crawfish, whether this week, next week, or the other week after. But when you got 1,000 pounds that you can't sell, you got to hold on that for 2-3 weeks. So yeah, anyway, just wanted to put that in there in terms of negotiations. Thanks.
No, but I totally understand that supply and demand. The rarer it is, the higher the price. So it would make sense to just slow down the harvesting of the crawfish to drive the price back up, and then try and keep it at that level, because then everyone benefits, because the crawfish are going to stay and might end up getting bigger, and therefore you might be able to sell them for more as well. And then, right,
Yes.
saving that, it doesn't make sense because you have it on the market for all that period of time. It's true.
Yes.
Thanks for that. Then there are different types. Oh, Rodney,
Yes,
you raised your hand?
I was just listening to that strategy, and I think it's really, really formidable because it benefits the organization and the individual in two ways. Benefits society as well, because you gain more by the strategic response to the selling, and then you give the crop an opportunity to continue to flourish.
Yeah, definitely. But
That
how
is
many?
really, really good.
But how many of our fishers would really want to do that? Because they're just going to want to go out and do the fishing and bring it in, not taking that into consideration that if they leave them there, they might get bigger, and you're going to be able to demand a higher price because you're not saturating the market.
Yeah, that's true. And Mr. Adrian made a good point earlier when he spoke about persons not knowing how to negotiate. I think it's a matter of education. So it's about sensitization, getting the people to know, getting them to understand strategy and how to implement certain, ways of bettering their lives and improving the culture. And
Yeah,
not
I
just
agree.
the culture of the people, but the culture of the species.
I agree. It's all about getting to know and understand how we can all benefit from what we're doing. Okay, thanks for that. Advocacy. What type of leaders do we need for advocacy? There's autocratic, bureaucratic, democratic, charismatic, transformational, and servant. Autocratic leadership determines the strategy, the policies, the procedures, and the direction of the organization, dictating everything to the people who they lead. So that's one of the leadership strategies. They are experienced and knowledgeable about a lot of things. Bureaucratic, these type of leaders follow the rules. This leadership style, they just follow the book. The power in these types of positions also comes that they're inflexible. So this is what the book says. This is the way we're going to do it. There's no way that we're going to move around it. It has to be this way because this is what the book says. Then you have democratic leaders. Democratic leaders are the decision makers, but their approach is that they allow others to feel engaged and have a stake in the final outcome. So people feel that they were a part of the decision. Then we have charismatic. The effects of charismatic leadership wanes after the leader has moved on. So you have a charismatic leader, they're a very good negotiator. Every time they go into any kind of meeting, you always get through because this person is so charismatic and everybody is charmed by them. But then what happens to the organization when that person leaves? Who else can take over? The next person may not be charismatic. So we need to be careful about that. And let me finish. And then transformational. Transformational leaders have high expectations and they drive for excellence. This can sometimes lead to increased pressure on the people who they work with, the members of the association, and create tension. They want to transform the organization, but because of the pressure, people just get fed up and cause tension. And then we have the servant leader. Servant leaders, because they want to serve everybody, often fall behind what the goals of the organization. This type of leadership is criticized for not being agile enough to respond to changing environments. And I just gave you 6 types of leadership when we go into the advocacy realm. But not one type is perfect. So it depends on what you are advocating for as to which type of leadership would be needed. So you have to change it around. You have to combine them. And sometimes if you have an advocacy team, there will be strengths that some people will have different strengths. So if you all go together, you'll be able to get through. Okay, anybody want to talk about that?
Hi, good night.
Good night.
All right, Rodney again. For me, I think it's not missing one, but I'll say it's missing one, and I'll tell you why. I believe an effective leader is one who is able to transition between the different styles of leadership effectively. In other words, he's the charismatic type, results oriented. He's the transformative type. He's able to lead others to change development and management. He's the sovereign type. He's able to lead others by serving them, providing a service to the organization that leads people towards him and encourages them to want to be a part of the organization. He's also that democratic individual who is able to listen and allow others to voice their opinions. He is also the person who takes consideration to the laws governing the organization, because we need these laws in order to ensure compliance and to reward compliance and non-compliance alike. He's also the person who is able to drive these laws and to ensure that they are being kept regardless of what other people might say or how they might feel. And he's also the type that is able to be flexible and allow others to feel comfortable and happy within the organization. Because I believe happy employees means a happy organization, a successful organization. So in other words, he is that emotionally intelligent and intellectual leader. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I totally agree. But do you think you're going to find one person with all of those attributes, or do you think it should be a team that leads?
Yes, I believe it should be a team. Different persons would add to other persons' personality and personal growth and development, because leadership is not something that is earned, it's something that is learned. So me being able to, or me being around, or being able to adapt from other people, it means that I'm growing, I'm developing, changing, I'm transitioning, I'm transforming as an individual. Thank you.
Yeah, that's it. That's 100%. That is exactly it, because we learn by those who are around us, and we can only we grow because of the information that we pick up from them. And I'm sure that's the reason why CNFO is having this Leadership Institute, so that we can all learn and grow. So advocacy has many facets that should be considered and mastered to be functional. We have to have collaboration. We have to know conflict management. We should know how to give and receive feedback. We need to provide influence. Leading and navigating change. Change is one of the hardest things for any of us to go through, because we like it the way it is. Why should we change? But that's something that needs to happen. Mastering difficult conversations. You may be friends with somebody in the organization, and they may be doing something that is wrong, or that a lot of persons don't agree with. So you need to be able to master those difficult conversations. Relationship management, your interpersonal skills. How do you relate to people? That's important. And you also have to be strategic and critical thinking. And you also have to have negotiation skills. So in summary, advocacy, representation, negotiation, and conflict resolution are critical for fisherfolk and for the fisherfolk organization. These tools ensure your rights and interests are protected because you need to ensure that they're protected. Otherwise, there's no future in what we're doing. And we need to start building these skills today so that we can shape a better future. So any questions? I'll try to answer them.
No questions here, thanks.
Everyone's good? Thank you. I should have had a curtsy, but I have a bow instead. So thank you all for listening to me. And let me see if I have anything else that I need to say. Yes. Thank you all for your time and attention. Remember that together we are stronger. By working together and using these skills, we can ensure that our voice is heard and our rights are respected. I look forward to seeing the amazing changes that we are going to make in our communities. Thank you.